Hello and welcome to episode 27 of Questioning Everything. Tonight's episode is The Lost World. I hope you guys are all having a great evening, and thank you so very much for tuning in late here tonight. So, we've spent a lot of time the last few episodes talking about our staged history. The faked photos, no set in any of these fires, nukes that don't nuke. Tonight, let's take a look at some of the inhabitants of this realm. Some of the inhabitants that have been erased in this lost history of ours. We've talked before about a few of them, giants and dragons. They all get put in the same categories, don't they? Cryptids, urban legends, mythical creatures, fantasy labels to dismiss them, for you to think of them as nothing more than just fairy tale. But were they more than just fairy tale? Were they more than just myths? I think we did a pretty good job going over giants and dragons, a good look into them, a good presentation, a good argument to prove their legitimacy. So tonight, I hope to do the same thing for you guys with some of my two favorite quote unquote mythical creatures giants, or I'm sorry, Blemmyae and Cynocephali. There are tons of these creatures lost to the history we have told. So to cover all of them in one episode would be quite hard, but I figure we'll cover a few of them here and there. I know a lot of you guys have suggested unicorns. You wanted to hear about them. Definitely something we're going to get to on another episode soon. Hello, Lori. How are you doing tonight? I see all the great welcomings in chat. Lori, Kristen, Michael, Scott, Bobby. How are all of you guys this evening? Hope you guys have a great night. They just blew up an old world building in Scotland today, Bobby says. Oh, I did not hear that. What one was that? I'll have to look into that. That's folks, that's how they do it today. It's not the great fires, the great citywide fires like they've had in the past. Now it's just convenient fires of these old historical buildings. You've seen it more and more in recent years, just some of the most beautiful buildings, historical buildings, and they just somehow magically engulf in flames. Bobby, let us know though what building in Scotland they blew up. I'm interested to learn about that. I'll dig into that after the show here. So I want to wrap up a little bit about yesterday before we jump into the topic at hand tonight. And if you guys want to be a part of the show, talk about the episode before or after the show, the Discord is a great place to do that. Uh, with that, before we kind of jump into a little bit from yesterday's episode, wanted to show a great fan submission over on Discord from S2lutions. He did what I encourage all of you guys to do, and many of you guys have been doing it. I've gotten tons of submissions over the years from Boots on the Ground. He says, and he's from Canton, Ohio, and he says, never thought the buildings were actually everywhere when I first saw your content, but they're truly everywhere. Yes, indeed, they are. And that's the real eye opening part for people. A lot of them see some of the famous shots from like cities of Chicago, like Paris shots of the mud flood and stuff. But it's really takes going to your own local town, your own local downtown areas and checking for yourself. And that's when the eyes get open. I posted a little bit about some of my downtown area, some photos and videos of it in the past. Maybe in the next couple days, I'll go out and take a little bit more and show you guys some of my own local area proof. I don't know though if it'll be in the next couple days though. I don't know how you guys are weather-wise, but we had a beautiful couple 60-degree days up here in the northern part of Wisconsin, and I thought the winter was all but behind us. I was just about ready to put up my winter shovel and then looked on the news and we go from 60 degrees just I believe yesterday even to this weekend we're supposed to have anywhere up to 30 inches of snow, if you can believe it. 30 inches of snow. So, yeah, this weather just keeps getting kookier and kookier, and I do not believe or buy the man-made climate change narrative. I don't know about you guys. So they did try to burn it down, Michael said. I'm looking over this here now. Fire began in a vape shop or Union Street, spread rapidly. Only historic facades building remained standing after the blaze. Additional collapses occurred Tuesday. Where was that at? It was a building in Glasgow as well here? Are we having just like a little firebombing of historic buildings chat? Where was that at, Michael? I don't see where that was at though. Somewhere in Glasgow and somewhere in Scotland. Oh, Union Corner, here it is. The ancient historic I'm sorry, Michael. Sorry, guys, I didn't see that up in the chat. The ancient historic building demolished in Scotland today is the Union Corner building in central Glasgow. Wow. I'll have to take a look at that. Fire starting in a vape shop. That's quite ironic. Okay, so back to this user submission here before we jump into the episode. S2 Lucians, he's in Canton, Ohio. And this is the local Canton, Ohio library. Let me see if you guys notice the very clear evidence of our buried layers. Pulling that up now for you guys. Let me get that full screen before I start it. And yeah, if you guys want to submit evidence to me, uh, Discord, like I mentioned, dropped the line already. Great place to do it. Also, my email, I'm the improbable dreamer at gmail.com. I will be honest with you folks, I get a lot of messages, a lot of emails. I try and respond to as much of them as I see. Uh, if you don't get a response from me in a timely manner, it's not that I'm trying to ignore you. It's just between all my other personal emails, scout emails for my kids' troops, school emails, it's really hard to keep on top of every message over the years. Just keep trying. Honestly, just keep trying. I won't get irritated, trust me. I'm not ignoring you intentionally. But here we go from Canton, Ohio, the front of the local library there. Let's rewind that back a little bit first, though, so you guys can see the whole thing. Sorry. Oh, that beautiful old world architecture. Canton, Ohio, he said, got the same great fire treatments as all these other cities in America. This is one of the buildings that survived from that fire. You can see how big that original archway was. You see that same pattern, those four circles, circle right there, same pattern that's found in so much of that stained glass work. It's all cymatic patterns, all part of that free energy network, guys. Hope you got the Stargate schedule I sent. Yes, Michael, I did see that. That was like right before I went under the weather. So like I seen it, I was gonna like open it, respond back to it, and then I personally just kind of forgot laying around getting better on the men's. But I'm I am going to dig into that Stargate because I do want to watch that show. A lot of you guys have told me to check out Stargate. A lot of parallels to some of the old world stuff we see. But thank you very much for the submission as to Lucian's over on Discord here. Let's get to the topic at hand tonight. Like I mentioned before, so many of these creatures, from dragons, giants, Cynocephali, Blemmies, unicorns, they're all told to us as nothing more than mythical creatures, nothing more than myths and fairy tales. But isn't it odd, like we've shown with giants, like we've showed with dragons, these mythical creatures that our ancestors just all happen to make up, were all made up in the same way, the same manner, worldwide, despite not having connections and communications with civilizations and humanity on other continents. Yet, in nearly every continent, you find the same supposed mythical creatures being represented as not myths, as not fables, but as actual creatures. So, to start here, let's talk about the topics that we covered a little bit yesterday. I had a few more points that I wanted to answer, a few of your questions that you guys asked. Got a little sidetracked with that Scotland building, but thank you very, very much for pointing that out. I'll check that out after the episode here, Bobby. So, a lot of you guys were asking, this one was by Lost Tech 99 on Facebook. Staged photos. Why go to all that trouble? So, we showed a lot of those staged Civil War photos. And really, it's to control the narrative. Bottom line, it's about presenting history. You know, they one of the most famous quotes is history goes to the victors. History is written by the victors. There's so many different variations of that quote. Plato even said, "Those who tell the stories rule society. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." Just think about that. Just think about all the parasites that run everything now. Lori, you asked about the mythical creatures here. They showed up on old maps. Oh, yes, tons of old maps showed the same and written by many different cartographers too. All showed the same quote mythical creatures. You had Cynocephali, you had Blemmyae, you had giants, you had dragons shown in all of these old world maps. If they were nothing but myth, why were they represented in cultures that had no communications with one another? How did they all invent giants? How did they all invent dragons? You could think, for some of the regions around Greece and, Europe and stuff, that these myths would spread. But why were they never discussed as just mythical creatures? They were discussed as a matter of fact. Countless battles were described. Alexander the Great fought his giants, or I'm sorry, fought dragon. Recorded by monks. Absolutely right, Lori. Kristen says, I'm 61 and I remember seeing some of these in grandma's old books. Yes, a lot of these creatures like giants. They were talking about giants and stuff in the 1900s, right up until like I'd say 1940s, 1930s. You would see articles almost on the regular from publications like the New York Times, the Atlantic, all these old, well-established newspapers talking about giant bones being found. We've done a whole episode on that, 8 to 10 plus feet tall, all gathered up by the Smithsonian, all never to be seen again. And, a lot of our elders, we just honestly, the sad part is how dry and bland they presented history to us in school with that whole standardized education. We never really thought to ask our elders too much about history until until most of them were gone. They would try and tell us the stories of the past, the true stories of the past. I've had many of you guys talk to me over the years about stories that their grandparents told them about, our true history and how they would be taught about Tartaria. They were even taught about a flat earth up in, as early as like the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, even all the way down in Peru and Argentina. Yes, absolutely. Everywhere. South America, Europe, all talking about Blemmies, Native Americans talking about Blemmies, giants, dragons, all of these creatures. And they didn't draw just random things that popped into their head, random fairy tales that they would hear from passing merchants or however they wanted to say it spread. They drew exactly what they saw. And there's a reason why it stuck so long in history. So, one other part here I really kind of wanted to say is about yesterday or about Tuesday, I'm sorry, is it's not just about faking one thing. It's not to say that the Civil War never happened, that shots were never fired. That's not what I'm saying here. It's that everything that we're presented currently in our history books are presented in a false narrative. The wars may very well have happened. The battles, the people that have went and fought and died, they happened, but the reasons why they happened is what's the perversion, is what's the manipulation. That's the point that I'm trying to make with these. They took so much time when it was an all hands on deck battle in the Civil War to stage photos, to stage scenes and events when it was the bloodiest battle supposedly in American history. That's the point that I'm trying to drag home with all of this. So moving on to tonight's main topic at hand. Sorry if I got a little off track wrapping up yesterday's episode. Let's start out with the Blemmyae. It wasn't just empires erased. Like I said, so many of this realm's creatures, its inhabitants, the ones that walked this realm side by side, helped build this world, like the giants. They've all been erased. So the first sighting of the Blemmies here was in 5th century BC. Herodotus, the father of modern history, as they say, mentioned both Blemmyae and Cynocephali. They were mentioned in Africa, India, even America maps. The first account, like I said, was in 5th century BC, all the way up until the 1500s, where they constantly mentioned, constantly showed on maps, tons of medieval lore and references of them. And then around the time Tartaria fell off the map, around the 1800s, around the reset time, so too did all of these creatures that up until then were told to us as real, were now relegated to the realm of fantasy. Let me pull up some of the depictions here I have of the Blemmyae. Oh, sorry, that's kind of a small picture. The Blemmyae are really kind of a interesting bunch. So some of the mainstream explanations of the Blemmyae were that they were an actual African tribe that got misinterpreted by explorers as the way that they were hunched, the way that they were kind of shouldered down, looked like they were headless people. So somehow that took off like wildfire, and multiple continents the world over all mentioned the same type of, I guess there were tons of tribes that were hunched over just like this. And you will see many depictions of them here as we go through them from ancient Greece, Rome, Egypt, Africa, all depicting these same creatures. Folks, this wasn't just a once mistaken tribe of Africans that looked like they were hunched over in a headless manner. And suddenly, everywhere from Egypt to the father of modern history, all depicted the same exact creatures. Bobby said, my aunt worked for the Smithsonian Institute for 40 years. That would be interesting to know what kind of story she has if she's under an NDA or anything like that. I know, it's pretty compartmentalized what people aren't know, what people are allowed to know, I should say, but 40 years in the Smithsonian, maybe she has some stories for us, Bobby. I'd love to hear them if she does. So again here, folks, we have artwork throughout the world of these Blemmyes. This was not a one-off depiction. This was supposedly a picture of the last Blemmyes spotted. I've heard hoaxes, I've heard that it was photo manipulation. Either way, it circulated a lot of times around the internet. I've seen it for years before AI. The photo on the left here I'm talking about, obviously. Uh, there's very little you can do with actual verification. All the mainstream will tell you is everything that breaks the narrative as a hoax. So take it as you will. But this was supposedly one of the last Blemmyes spotted in the late 1800s, 1900s time frame. So I cannot attest to the validity of that photo 100% or not, but I just thought I'd throw that in there with that stigma. 9 Gig More 9 says, Homie, look up Vibes of Cosmos, massive red pill for hidden lands, ice walls. Atlantis is right off the coast of West Africa next to. Okay. Well, I've seen a little bit of Vibe of Cosmos before. He's got a lot of good stuff, lots of good stuff there. You guys should definitely check him out. You'd love to see it. Lori says, who knows how much evidence was destroyed by the Smithsonian? Oh, tons, tons, tons. And it's not just the Smithsonian. That's just one of the focused on boogeymans. You got to also think of the National Archives, the Library of Congress. The Library of Congress, guys, has millions and millions of photos and videos. And you are allowed access to a very select curated amount of those. Most of them are locked away in vaults and archives deep in the Library of Congress. The National Archives, like I mentioned, the Vatican is another big one. Miles and miles and miles of underground chambers, underground vaults of locked away knowledge that should be freely and readily accessible, especially in the digital age. They tell you that you can access it, but you need to have a research project, a specific knowing of what you want accessed in these vaults at the Vatican, and have like a research topic or something from a university or something along those lines to warrant access to the title. So you need to know what's in there. So it's like, oh yeah, you can access what's ever hidden in this box, but you need to know what's in the box first. How does that make sense? So it's just like what they say with the Antarctica conundrum. They say, "Oh, yeah, you can access Antarctica. You can go there, but really, you can't. It's like 10,000 tour to see the tip of Antarctica, and that's it." Just a way of masking the many, many lies. So what exactly happened to the Blemmyes? Where are they now? Well, if you'll notice in a lot of these old photos, a lot, or well, not these depictions, you will see this common theme here. Troops of armed men against these supposed mythical creatures. As we expanded our reach in this realm after the reset, we took over these lands from these not as organized, not as established creatures like the Blemmyes, like Cynocephali, like giants, where we outnumbered them. We had them in numbers, we had them in might. So you will see this same scene, just like time and time again, humanity comes and conquers lands. Whether or not, the moral debate on that aside, it is the common thing, and that's what happened to these creatures as well. I don't believe they are all gone by any means, but they are still in isolated lands, perhaps the remote lands, perhaps beyond the ice, lands we don't have access to. Japan came out with a report that they discovered 1,000 islands that they've never before seen, which I found mesmerizing when they say we just in recent, modern times that we've discovered 1,000 more islands in the Pacific. Well, how is that possible when we have thousands of satellites overhead constantly 24/7, right? How did we possibly miss 1,000 islands? And I wonder what's inhabiting those islands. Wondering what inhabits some of the remote areas of the South American rainforest, the jungles, where we know there's massive, massive amounts of evidence of past civilizations, grand civilizations all across the Amazon, but there's so much remote and isolated regions that they're impossible to get to even today. I bet it would help if we had something like an airship, just saying. But I wonder what creatures were pushed off into those remote regions where humanity doesn't quite reach. Because that's where I think a lot of these creatures still are. And they've learned to stay away from us. Why don't we see them today? Because they know if we are aware of their presence, we'll come and conquer them just like we've done before. But when humanity was still in a more infantile state, in an unorganized state, these creatures roamed the lands. Cynocephali, Blemmyes, giants, dragons. But even in the mythical stories we're told about giants and dragons. We're even in kids' stories, we're told about how we must go, the great brave knight goes off and slays the dragon, slays the evil giant, Jack and the Beanstalk. These creatures were wiped out to the point of extinction from us, or at least wiped out of our lands. There's just a few photos of Blemmy though that I have. Let's make sure that I got them all. It's at the end of my slideshow and make sure that I showed you guys all of them. I'll take a few of your questions about them and we'll go on to some of the Cynocephali next. Yeah, Lori says the Amazon, that's another place they burned out to hide what was there. A lot of places in the Amazon, absolutely they did, Lori. Yes. Still, even so today, there's so much of that region. I think that's the continents. I think that's what the Pacific War was fought over. The Pacific War, like the Pacific engagement in World War II, or another one. Yeah, I mean, World War II was a cleanup after the last reset, folks. Same with World War One. Civil War, I believe, was more of a land grab. The Revolutionary War, I mean, all these wars, they happened. Yes, there's plenty of stories, personal experiences. World War II, World War One, Civil War, that family lines that still, have passed down stories of their own engagements. But most soldiers are never told the actual true purpose or meanings behind their orders, right? They're just told, go over to this place, fight this guy because he's, a threat to our democracy, threat to our freedom. We're never really told the real story. And we all know, just look at these wars going on today. There's far more behind them than just, oh, we have to stop Iran from getting nukes or whatever. There's far more behind those stories. All just narrative. They find random animals on islands thousands of miles from any continent. Oh, yes. Yes. And we'll never actually hear about them. There'll be rumors and stuff, but they'll just quickly be squashed as nothing more than just conspiracy. There are many lands we aren't told about, Kristen says. Yes, absolutely, Kristen. Yes, there is so much more, so much more. Admiral Byrd found vast green lands beyond the ice in Antarctica in his diaries. He documented that shortly after he came back and did the whole talk show circuit about them. He passed away. Funny little coincidence. So, the next of our mythical creatures on our lineup today, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about is the Cynocephali. I want to talk a little bit more about them than the Blemmyae because there is a real famous Cynocephaly, dog headed creature in history. You might know him as Saint Christopher, but officially, he was depicted historically as a dog headed creature. Reason why they say, to give you both sides of the story, was because a mistranslation for when he became a saint to the artist that was to, do up his saint portrait or whatever. A mistranslation about his features and description was given to the artist, and it was a mistranslation that led to him being depicted as a dog, which I think is just hilarious. So that would be cool if there was no other mentions of any dog-headed people before or anything like that, or if it was just one artist that depicted Saint Christopher like that. And who would just say, "Oh, somebody's telling me this person's a dog," and then if there was actually no dog people, they would think that's crazy and actually, like, get some clarification before making a beautiful painting of a saint as a dog. Headless people, is that a Democrat? That's most politicians, left or right. It's the same on both sides. Japan has similar art like that. Yes, there are depictions of Blemmyae and Cynocephaly, mystic, in Japan. Um, thought I had a few of them in there for the Blemmyae, but yeah, you guys just do a search for them. They are in every culture from Africa, Greece, Rome, South America, Native Americans, and the same with Cynocephaly. And even today, what we are told for Cynocephaly as just werewolves, the myth lives on, as it were. Okay, so much like the Blemmyae, the first mention of Cynocephali was around the 5th century BC in Greece. There was a whole book written, The Medieval Bestiaries, that featured all creatures, manner of real and supposed myth and make believe. And again, they faded out around the 1500s, medieval times, and ultimately completely around the same time empires like Tartaria faded from the maps after the last reset. So they were what are cynocephaly? They're obviously, as you can see here, human bodies, dog heads. Saint Christopher is the earliest, well, one of the most famous ones, probably the most famous one. But the first account goes from Greece, and again, this was worldwide. Europe, Africa, India, all depictions, like Lori said earlier, on old world maps. Bobby says griffins are dog-headed with wings, and they were on the Tartarian flags. Yes, griffins and dragons both represented in the Tartarian Empire. I mean, that's a great way to erase an empire, their symbolism and all that stuff, also associate them with myth and legend. So it's easier to sell the Tartarian Empire that so predominantly featured them on their symbols as myth and legend as well. No surprise, you also see a lot of Tartarian giant imagery as well, right? So Marco Polo, another famous explorer, also mentioned them, claimed that the dog-headed people lived on Andaman Island and Nicobar Island. It was in the 16th century that the Cynocephali found themselves located in the New World with the publications of the Carta Marina, the guide and instructions for the Carta Marina in 1525 by Lorenz Fries. And despite the mainstream saying there's no empirical evidence of their existence, so many famous explorers, so many famous historians, so many famous artists all depicted the same. They didn't draw make believe characters, myths. I mean, if you're wanting to publish history, you want to publish your art as actual depictions of people. You're not going to make dog people if there wasn't actual dog people. You weren't going to make giants if there weren't actual giants. They depicted exactly what they saw, folks, time and time again. It wasn't just a misinterpretation that led to one portrait artist error of Saint Christopher. No, it spread because there were cynocephaly. Thousands of pictures of Saint Christopher is out there. Some of them are even altered where they painted over the original dog person, cynocephaly, and they painted a human head on top of it. Look at Anubis in Egypt. Another famous cynocephaly. You see here, tons of Egyptian depictions of dog-headed people. There's a reason why it's stuck in all of our historical documents. Uh, 9 Gigmore says, "Hey Doc, in your thumbnails, you're wearing what looks like an Orthodox cross. Are you an Orthodox Christian?" Kind of no official. If I mean, if you be anything, I was born and raised Catholic. At one time, I was considering going to the seminary to be a Catholic priest. God has found a different path for me, thankfully. But I was, you know, probably agnostic for a little while. I definitely believe in God and Jesus, higher power. But if anything, I'm more Catholic than anything else. I'm not really practicing one way or the other. It was a cross and a St. Christopher medal that was gifted to me from one of my Catholic relatives. But no, I mean, it's not, it's not any, I'm not an Orthodox Christian by trade or anything like that. I'm just kind of more Catholic. If I had to, I'd pick an identification. But great question, nine, Igamore nine. Appreciate that. Okay, so like I said here, we have these Cynocephali being depicted from as far back as the 5th century BC, much like the Blemmyae, and much like the Blemmyae, they were found in every single continent, despite us not having communications across the continents, across nations, South America, the Native Americans, all of these tribes depicted the same creatures. This wasn't just one artist. This wasn't just some Greek rumor that spread. It passed and spread and continued because, again, the artists depict exactly what they're seeing, folks. Like, it's time and time again the same. It's why dragons, it's why giants were shown not as mythical, but real, because they were depicted exactly as the artist saw them. The correlation of it, you have to, I mean, it's quite clear. The correlation between the Blemmyae, the Cynocephali, all depicted from as far back as written history was supposedly documented. All the last accounts of them were right around the 1500s and up until the 1800s when they were just completely erased. It's the same story, these same creatures. Yes, Lisa, the dogmen, they had several names, Cynocephaly, dogmen. I believe the werewolves, the supposed myths of the werewolves, are another version of these Cynocephaly, just like Bigfoot, I believe, are giants hidden out in the remote areas of this realm. A lot of these cryptids, these mythical creatures, these random sightings that we see in modern times are these creatures that once lived side by side with the rest of humanity. They were just pushed out. They were just conquered, just like we do every other native tribe that has lands that we want. But before that, they were in some way, shape, or form a part of human society. A society that I don't think was solely built just by us humans. I believe there was a lot of creatures that shared this realm with us. That's why a lot of the flags, even today, like talked about Scotland, Wales, and stuff, their flags have the dragons on them. Uh, Griffins featured on many flags. Dragons featured on the Russian flag. It's all there, not because it was some myth or fairy tale. It's all there because it was what they seen then. Lori, you're talking about China. They had in China all real creatures on their zodiac except for one supposed fake dragon. They had an official state dragon handler up until the 1700s. those weren't just some cushy jobs. Those weren't just some oversights with the zodiac. I mean, again, it's all real. Nobody had a dinosaur flag. Exactly, Mystic. Nobody had a dinosaur flag. Well, dinosaurs weren't invented until the mid 1800s, anyways. So, yes, indeed. Let me read a couple brief excerpts here from both about Cynocephaly and Blemmyae. They're little bits and pieces I took off the internet here to kind of give you a full overview of them. A little bit of how they're passed off on as the mainstream tells us they're how they're passed off as just mythical creatures, the excuses they're given for the continuity and the correlations through all of these ancient civilizations. So, as I said earlier, I'll read this one about the Cynocephaly first here. The first earliest mention of them that we know about was in the 5th century BC. Greek explorer Megasthenes in 350 to 90 BC traveled to India, reportedly witnessed the Cynocephaly firsthand, and the Greek explorer ethnographer was sent as an ambassador to the court in India in around 303 BC. And then, however, he was further stated that he owed much of his knowledge of the Cynocephaly races from the Brahmins, an esteemed class of philosopher. But what they say he actually may have saw was likely confused for Indian mythology. So this Greek explorer and these esteemed philosophers all were confused, according to the mainstream, about Cynocephaly as no more than just being confused with Indian mythology and ethnography. So that's the official narrative for how the Greeks started depicting the Cynocephaly. Apparently, a couple of their great philosophers went over, or their great explorers went over to India and got confused by the Indian myths of dog people, even though they claimed directly that they saw the dog-headed people. And then again, it spread like wildfire from there. As exploration of Europe increased, the Cynocephaly were pushed to lesser known corners of the world. Cynocephaly were later claimed to have lived on the island of the Pacific Ocean in the Middle Ages. That's where explorer Marco Polo came in, claiming that the Cynocephaly lived in the sorry if I pronounced this wrong, Andaman Islands and the Nicobar Islands. So this was another famous explorer, 1,000 years plus since the first sighting, thousands of years since first sighting Marco Polo, claiming that they lived out in the Pacific Islands. And then it was in the 16th century that the Cynocephaly found themselves again located in the New World with the publication of the Carta Marina in 1525, a famous publication at the time. So, sorry, I'm just trying to get my next page to load up here. Research from the medieval sources have also shown that the representation of the dog-headed creatures, the Cynocephaly, was used as an prerogative or a derogative or like a negative terms, kind of like rice burners, or other slangs and stuff like that. They were used to describe like Jews, Ottomans, Turks. So they say there's a little bit of racism that was the reason why dog-headed people kind of stuck around, that we just started calling people from other areas of the world cynocephaly and dog-headed people. Again, if that makes sense to you, let me know. It makes very little sense to me. How do you confuse a unicorn for a rhino? Yeah, that's absolutely great point, Lori. That's what they said was the excuse for unicorns, is that the first people just saw rhinos and thought they were horses with horns on them. I mean, if you look at the creatures, they look nothing alike. It's the same thing. It's the same silly excuses they use, like, "Oh, Alexander the Great was just fighting a really large lizard or snake or anaconda," or something like that is what they use as an excuse for dragons. Or dragons were used metaphorically to describe evil. That's why they're talked about in the Bible. It was just a metaphor. They all use the same silly excuses to explain all of this away. They never really thought we would make the connections, though. That's the importance of it. That's the importance with kinda going over the official narrative of all of these creatures, the official narrative of all these world fires and stuff, because then you really start seeing the correlation, the connection between them all. You know, you hear Cynocephaly, you hear Blemmyae, and you just, "Oh, okay, those are just, mythical creatures," but when you read deeper into their stories, their origins, their historical accounts like we're doing here, that's when you kind of have that aha moment that, okay, why are every one of these civilizations, despite being continents away where they had no communications, why are they all depicting these same creatures since basically the beginning of written history? It's because they depicted and wrote about exactly what they saw. That's why they were never stated as myth back then. Unicorns were actually real mystic. You've seen one on TV. Oh, I've seen tons of evidence about unicorns. We'll have an episode on unicorns here soon. They're definitely, I believe, were real. You don't mistake unicorns with rhinos. It's just not going to happen, folks. So yeah, because of the whole racial thing, they called like Jews Muslims because Muslims consider dogs impure. Uh, they used it as racial slurs, and that's how they kind of explain away cynocephaly. However, it doesn't explain why Saint Christopher was depicted in so many different images here as a dog. Saint Christopher wasn't a Jew. Saint Christopher wasn't a Muslim. Saint Christopher wasn't a Turk. He wasn't any of that. Why were there so many depictions of them? None of the official explanations make sense, do they? It's just kind of a handful of explanations to tell you why they weren't real. They even had medieval armor with dog-headed pieces on them. I thought I had them in this slideshow. I don't. I'll post them on some of my socials. Check out like my Telegram or something in the next couple days. I'll pull them up out of my archives, out of my stack of stuff here, and I'll post them on those pages so you guys can see some of the artifacts. Of course, people say, well, where's the remains of these blemmies, these cynocephali? Well, if you remove the heads, literally, they're just humanoid figures. You can say they're, ancient human forms with unrecognizable heads or destroyed heads, and anything that actually comes up of any legitimacy will be dismissed as hoax. It's their famous line, "Oh, it's just a hoax," or "It's just a, conspiracy." And I'm sure there's tons and tons of these actual full remains of creatures like cynocephaly, creatures like dragons, Blemmyae. They're just buried and locked away in archives like the Smithsonian, like the Vatican, all the narrative gatekeepers of our history. It's why You don't see them, and anyone that, stumbles upon them, like they did with giants back in the day, all the giant remains that were found in America back in the day, when they were stumbled upon, you would see the news stories of the Smithsonian coming in, digging them up, taking them away, paying the people for them in some instances, and then claiming they were just hoaxes or they never have any records of them. That's why I'm waiting on my third submission of my FOA request to them for these giant remains that they have thousands of documented cases of, nearly hundreds of documented cases of receiving, but yet they tell us they don't actually have any of them. That's exactly what they use for these Blemmyae and these Cynocephali. Oh, there's never been any remains found because we say so. But if you actually want to look at what remains they actually have in their archives, you'll never be able to get access to it, folks. All right. So let's take a quick sponsor break here, minute sponsor break. Get back to a little bit more on the Blemmyae and the Cynocephali. Take some more of your questions, and then we'll chat a little bit about tomorrow's episode. Be right back with you in just a minute. Stay tuned. A quick shout out to this program's sponsor, Riverside. If these live shows sound smooth and clear, that's Riverside making it happen. Killer audio, zero hassle, and it works every time, even on long nights like tonight. I've tried a bunch. This is the one that actually delivers. Want to start your own podcast? You should totally do it. Make your voice heard. Grab my link in the bio or show notes. It's an affiliate link, helps support the show, costs you nothing. Thanks for listening. Now back to the mysteries. All right, I am back here. So I want to now read here my article. I kind of gathered a few places on the Blemmyae, going over historically the mainstream official narrative of them, starting with the 500 or the 5th century BC sighting of Herodotus, the father or grandfather of modern history. But let me take a few of your questions here first while I still got them pulled up here. Mystic, you said, I heard stories in the Philippines about tiny people that can fit on a normal person's hand. Yes, I actually posted a video of these tiny villages, these tiny ancient villages, and I'd like to say it was in Peru or something. And there's just lines and lines of these tiny little homes. And they look just like ancient ruins, like ancient sites that you'd find full size in Peru, but they're just tiny little places, and with them, there's, legends and, again, myths of tiny little people that inhabited these little homes. And then you also hear stories of, like, pixies and fairies, tiny little people, gnomes throughout culture as well. So I absolutely believe those stories in Philippines. I mean, all of our cultures, all of our civilizations have these same stories for a reason. They stuck for a reason, folks. Great question or great comment there, Mystic. Laura, you said, and all these dog headed people are all the same breed of dog. From what I've seen, there are no German Shepherds, etc. I heard that the giant remains were stored in a warehouse that just happened to have asbestos, so they can't be retrieved. Great comment, Lori. I heard that about the giant remains, and I've also heard that they disposed a lot of the giant remains in the ocean, talking about the Smithsonian there. There was supposedly a lawsuit against that. The site Snopes or whatever debunked that supposedly, but that's like the official mainstream's debunker site. So take that at face value. But it is quite proven that the Smithsonian has received hundreds of these giant remains, and they have never presented any records or evidence of them since. I haven't heard of that asbestos story behind them. That's an interesting one. I wouldn't be surprised though. Yeah, Michael dumped them in the ocean. That's one of the other popular stories. I don't know if they did any such. I mean, they know that we can never, we're never going to break down the gates of the Smithsonian to see what's actually under there, and they're never going to show us. They have them stashed in some warehouse somewhere, I'm sure. The government is, especially the U.S. government. It's it's a big government of hoarders. They never throw away anything. They just throw it in some black site. They love to hide things. They don't love to throw things away. They hoard everything. Giants in stasis in Antarctica. I don't know about the stasis in Antarctica, but like Gilgamesh in Iraq, that was supposedly a big reason for the US invasion of Iraq, Operation Iraqi Freedom in the 2000s. And the Gulf War was to find Gilgamesh. And, they need him, the body of Gilgamesh, to revive the fallen angels, I believe. That's their whole kind of goal in all of this. It seems like if you look at a lot of the Epstein files and stuff, it's creepy how the elites all seem to be on this whole Satanist pedo child trafficking stuff, isn't it? And it seems even weirder how it goes back hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? Got those orphan trains, those orphan asylums. Those were the old world little St. John or little St. James Island or whatever. Little original. I mean, history repeats itself. If it doesn't repeat itself, folks, it certainly rhymes. Yes, Michael. They definitely they said didn't they find a Stargate or portal in Iraq? Yeah, they found tons of that stuff. They found giants in Afghanistan too. Stargates in Iraq. That was a big reason why they went in. Saddam, and one of the first places we like went to and once like we occupied when we took went in Iraqi freedom was the big museum there. Took over all this artifacts and stuff right away. That was like one of the first places we occupied with troops on the ground there. Make no mistake, all these times we've spent in the Middle East, folks, hasn't been just about oil. It's been about destroying the past. We fund these rebel fighters, these freedom fighters, these terrorist groups. Our own governments fund them. It's not just this US, but all of our governments fund these little freedom fighters and have them wreak havoc on all these ancient cities, all these old world cities where they come and destroy the land, destroy the monuments, destroy things like these stargates there. Words in pic is Persian. I think it says females growing them children alone. I think that's not sure. Is that this? That's what you're seeing here on this photo. First mate A92. I did not know what that said. That's interesting. Thank you for letting us know that. Truthful Free says maybe we are miniature. I think we are shrinking. I think we are definitely shrinking. I believe we were the giants, at least a large part of us. Uh, Adam, Noah, they were all depicted as giants. They were also depicted to live much larger or much longer, sorry, hundreds and hundreds of years. Why was that? Because there was far more oxygen back then. There was far denser atmosphere back then. And with a denser atmosphere with more oxygen, it just breathes a much larger and much more abundant life. And since then, the oxygen levels have decreased. The atmospheric pressure has decreased, and we have gotten smaller and smaller. Perhaps we will become the little miniature people living in those stone villages in Peru. Yeah, thanks for the Persian translation. Bobby said, "Yeah, thank you very much for that, first mate. I appreciate that." So yeah, if you guys want to know that this picture is Persian, let me pull back up some of the Blemmyae again now for you guys. I want to read a little bit more on that Blemmyae topic before we wrap up the show tonight. Keep dropping your questions as well, questions and comments in the chat. I'll try and get to as much of them as possible. And any ones that I don't get to, we will answer on Open Lines Friday tomorrow. Okay. So, with the Blemmyae, starting in 5th century BC, the Blemmyae were depicted as a real African tribe, actually, a tribe that were hunched over, their head sank down, and that was the supposed origins of Blemmyae. However, their stories of the headless people persisted for centuries after 5th century BC. Roman Mela in 45 AD, a Roman geographer wrote that the Blemmyae lived in Africa and had their faces in their chest. And this was confirmed by Pliny the Elder, who said the tribe had no heads, their mouths and eyes being seated in their breast, and located them in Ethiopia and Nubia. The stories of these strange headless men continued long after. In medieval Europe, drawings of these creatures can be found in manuscripts and on world maps, chartings of the unknown regions. A drawing of a Blemmyae featured in an Anglo-Saxon manuscript in the British Library dating 1025. And Blemmyaes are also found on the Hereford map Mundi of 1300, the largest medieval map to still exist. So, on the largest medieval map ever made, the largest one to ever still exist, made in 1300, they were depictions of Blemmyae. There was also depictions of giants and Cynocephali on this map, by the way, and many other creatures as well. And in 560 AD, Isidore Sevel, I hope I pronounced that right, explains in his entomologies that people believe that in Libya, Blemmyae are born as trunks without heads and have their mouth and eyes on their chest. Others born without necks have their eyes on their shoulders. So this was an account in Libya here, and this was in uh it's 560 AD, sorry. 560 AD in Libya. Bobby says, "I'm sorry, but Blemmyae creep me out." They kind of do. They kind of remind me. I don't know if this is your guys' time or not, but the Real Monsters on Nickelodeon. It kind of reminds me of that Crumb monster from, I don't know, maybe they threw it in there, as a homage to the old world, kind of a tribute or whatever. They gotta kind of show you the truth of these things. But Crumb reminded me a lot of Blemmyae when I first started looking into them. I don't know if you guys remember that show. About 20, 30 years ago now. The So yeah, we talked about the largest medieval maps. We were talking about them spotted in Libya, or the stories of them in Libya in 560 AD. The Blemmyae in the 11th century Anglo-Saxon manuscript in the British Library. As the centuries progressed, stories of blemmies continued, and they moved with the boundaries of exploration. In the late medieval period, some are shown as being in India. So again, we have them spotted in India again, such as in 1436 Andrea Bianco map. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that here. So on the Andrea Bianco map in 1436, the 16th century arrived and the discovery of the Americas began. And again, Native American lore depicted tribes of these headless creatures again in the New World. The Blemmyae also moved across the seas. The Ottoman admiral Pierre Rez placed a Blemmyae on his 1513 world map. In 1596, Sir Walter Raleigh wrote a book about his journey to Ghana, where he reports that there was a nation of people whose heads appeared not above their shoulders, who are reported to have eyes in their shoulders and their mouths in the middle of their breast, and that a long train of hair backwards between their shoulders. And that's what I have for the Blemmyae there on that. So why did people believe these stories for so long, and where, if they were just myths? It's because you have some of the most famous historians, some of the most famous cartographers, some of the most famous maps, some of the most famous bestiaries, all depicting them not as mythical creatures, but with actual real humans, with real other creatures that are still around to this day. They are kind of creepy though. I will say that. Bobby said, "Ah, Real Monsters was crazy. He held his eyes in his hands." Yes, yeah, Crumb, the Blemmy Crumb, probably. Yeah, I love that show. I can't believe they canceled that. Like after like just like 2 seasons or something. I That was one of my favorite shows as a kid. That and like Hey Arnold. So these are just a few of these creatures here that all share the same stories, but all are told to us as myth. They have standing power. They have long standing power in depictions throughout many centuries worth of civilizations. Many civilizations across this realm of ours. Whether you believe it flat, round, hollow, oval, donut shaped, whatever, all of our ancient ancestors depicted these same creatures for a reason, because they were not myth, they were real. So, with that, folks, that's just two of the more obscure creatures that are not too often talked about that I wanted to kind of highlight a little bit tonight. My sickness kind of threw off all my show schedules and stuff, so I'm kind of still catching up from that. So, I thought I'd throw this episode in between my other content I was working on. Let's take a few more of your questions you guys had on these. I appreciate all the comments you've been dropping all over. You guys are awesome. First Mate says, yes, they were in Libya coming from Yemen when desert was green woods. Yes. Yes, there was in the whole Sierra, the whole sands of Africa, all of Africa used to be green and lush. You see it in older maps like 1800s maps show green lands in Africa, lush lands in Africa. Things switched up after some of these resets. the French fries. That looks like the dude from the Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Yeah, it kind of does. I tried extracting the text and it came back. Ah, I don't know what that one was from there. Truthful, I'm sorry. Um, oh, from that one Libya picture I showed you guys earlier. Yeah. Let me see if I can pull that one back up for you guys. All right, folks. So tomorrow's episode, what we're going to do again is the open line Fridays format. That is whatever you guys want to talk about, the topics that interest you, whether it was what we discussed the last two episodes for this week or past episodes or things that you found yourself in your local community. I'd love to see some more of your guys' local mud flood submissions. Keep those coming. Yes, Lori, thank you. Don't forget to like this stream, guys. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, share it with your friends. That's the best thing you can do to support this channel is just give us a like, give us a follow, and give us a share. So Open Lines Friday, how that concept works for you guys is if you want to call in and you want to be a part of the show, talk with me, either share your evidence offline or if you want to share it with the rest of us personally, go into my Discord and just drop a message, say, hey, I want to be a part of the show for Open Lines Friday. And we can get you into a queue before the show. We'll just send you an invite link and you just click on the invite link when you're ready to go and we'll get you in and you can chat about whatever you would like to share with us. So far, I know you guys haven't taken advantage of that, but I really hope you guys do because it'll really be quite a lot of fun to get some of you guys on here live sharing your stories. So that'll be what Friday's episode will be about. And let me see, got a couple more things I wanted to point out about that. Can't see where I left that down. Anyways, so we went over Cynocephali, we went over dragons, we went over giants, we went over Blemmyae. We've gotten 4 of these creatures that shared this realm with us. Many, many more to go on the creatures side of things. What creatures shall we talk about next? I'll leave that to you guys for the next episode I do on this. Drop in the comments either on this show or in Discord or wherever. Even send me an email. Tell me, hey, I want to talk about unicorns or whatever. And I'll do the ones that get the most submissions next. As for what we'll talk about with Open Lines Friday, that'll be a lot about what you guys want. I got a couple things on hand to show you guys, but it'll be a nice laid back show, nothing of serious depth necessarily. We'll just kind of roll with whatever you guys want to talk about. Let me take a few more of your questions here and then we'll kind of wrap up tonight's show. Have I seen Martin Leedkiss's video, The Greatest Story Never Told? Yes. Yes, I believe that's not Europa, is it? Maybe I haven't done. I'll look when I get off. It sounds very, very, very familiar, but I've seen so much over the years and I kind of forget some of the names and stuff. I'm gonna write that down and check up check up on it after I get off the show and see if I remember it. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I've seen that The Greatest Story Never Told. I just kind of want to look it up after I get offline. I'm kind of writing a note for myself now, guys. Lisa says, excited to find you live tonight. Very interesting information. Hey, I'm glad you enjoyed it, Lisa, and I'm glad you got a chance to catch me live. Yeah, thanks all you guys for tuning in live. Believe me, I know it's late. I'm a parent, and it's hard. I gotta get up with my toddler at, like, 7 AM and stuff. The reason why I have it so late is, again, because of my toddler, by the time she's finally down and sleep, 10:30 PM my time is really, like, the best and first time of the day my house actually is quiet enough for an hour or so to be able to put on a show for you guys. So, my hopes is in the next, coming months, once she gets a little more older and a little better at bedtime, that we can maybe push this show back to maybe a 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock time once she knows when quiet time is. But, right now she's just a little toddler. She doesn't really know when quiet time and when daddy needs to do a show. So for now, it's got to be the 10:30 late time. Appreciate all you guys that do tune in to it. But yeah. Oh, he's the flat earth British guy. Yes, I know that guy. He's a great guy. He's been around for years, hasn't he? Also with like John Levi and stuff. Oh yeah, I've seen his stuff years and years. Yeah, he's a great, great guy. Great, great guy. Truthfulness, a great job. Should keep up the greatness work. Hey, I appreciate you too. Thank you guys very, very much. All you guys' kind, kind comments all the time. Like even when I was sick and I posted that I was sick, you guys are just the nicest, subscribers that any channel could have. I truly do mean that, like, how much I grown, like, I couldn't have done it without you guys. That's why I said this, podcast, this show is just as much yours as it is mine. That's why I have the open line Fridays and encourage you guys to submit your questions, submit your findings. Like, I want us to grow as a community. Um, that's how we make the illegitimate become legitimate. We get out of that conspiracy theorist category when we unite and come together as a community. And this is one of the best communities, the community that we have, like the Tartarian community, the mud flood community, like people like John Levi and stuff. Like, you guys are all so great, so personable, so like even some of the big creators I've had conversations with, like Flat Earth Dave and stuff. We really are in it for each other. We're not in it for ourselves. At least a lot of the ones that I've met. Like, there's so much legitimacy here and so much just camaraderie to find, with the common goal of finding the truth from the big creators to the small creators and to the followers of these platforms. You guys are really what move the metric, move the needle, wake up more and more people. Like, I personally can't thank you enough for all of your guys' support over the years. And I know all the other creators in this community truly think the same. Like, we are nothing without you guys. Thank you so much. With that said, we will see you tomorrow evening, Friday, 10:30 p.m. Central Time, live as always, for our Open Lines Friday of Questioning Everything. And until then, folks, question everything, get some sleep, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great night. Thanks for tuning in.